More importantly, as a personal matter, we believe in it. If we're gaining anything, we're gaining something. But to do nothing is to, more importantly, seal our fate.
Good morning, my friends, and welcome to yet another profound installment of Weekend Update. From high above all other puerile, insipid, and totally fabricated forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Big Horns in beautiful Buffalo, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. If you didn't know it, the Wyoming press doesn't act all that much different than the national one. In each successive newspaper, they copy and paste what they read the night before. For example, on March 30th, Leo Trotsky-Wolfson published an article entitled Wyoming Republicans Fracture as Faction Forms to Counter Hard-Right Wyoming Freedom Caucus. But on March 29th, the Representative Liz Storr-funded news outlet WyoFile published an article entitled Far-Right Advances Motivate, quote, pro-Wyoming lawmakers to organize. Also on March 29th, the Buffalo Bullsheet published the same article, Far-Right Advances Motivate Pro-Wyoming Lawmakers to Organize. On March 31st, on page A3, the Red Star published the exact same article from WyoFile. Not to be outdone, on March 31st, the Oil City News, the organization that was caught red-handed sitting during the national anthem at last year's Trump rally, published yet again the exact same article. Really, there's no difference in what they're doing than this.
Threats to American democracy.
The slippage of democracy.
For the first summit from the first summit of our democracy.
And the threats facing our democracy.
Freedoms are eroding and authoritarianism is rising.
American democracy is under assault by the forces of extremism led by his predecessor, Donald Trump.
Threat to democracy.
In an effort to take over the government, to force their Christo-fascist views on the rest of us.
And the threat to democracy represented there.
The greatest danger to American democracy right now is not coming from Russia, China, or North Korea. It is coming from the Republican Party.
It's clear that the talking points all have the same source, but the question is, from where? Nationally, it's pretty easy to determine. Nancy Pelosi speaks, the media repeats. But in Wyoming, the answers to that question are, well, more elusive. Because, until very recently, there hasn't been any opposition to what the Redcoats, or Democrats that hide in the Republican Party, want to do. So there's really been no need for any subterfuge. Until now. This past year, the state of Wyoming generated roughly a $1.8 billion surplus. You might be asking yourself, why not just sock that away and live off the interest? I found the answer in a random act of honesty from State Representative Carly Provenza of Laramie. Quote, Team Wyoming and the Democrats were voting on how to spend government money to benefit the people of Wyoming, knowing that some money has to be spent. End quote. First of all, the government doesn't have its own money, and second, why does it have to be spent? And perhaps the most important of all questions is, what exactly does it have to be spent on? Cowboy State Politics submitted a series of open records requests related to the good representative's comment that we have to spend money on some things for Wyoming citizens. To narrow it down, I asked for all necessary appropriations, less than $14 million and more than $762. Who gets the first email at the state agency regarding open records requests determines a lot of what you get. And unbeknownst to me, I hit the jackpot, though I didn't know it initially. What I was sent was a typewritten memo dated June 18th of 1990, a set of coordinates, latitude 44.395 and longitude 108.278, and then a dollar amount, $13,486,252.12 for the purposes of a statewide communications hub. If this is all sounding too unbelievable to be true, trust me, I was a little incredulous myself. Most of the time in this business, when you get answers to questions, the only thing they lead to is more questions, and that's certainly the case with this communications hub. First, those coordinates lead you out into the middle of nowhere pretty close to Otto, Wyoming. The only thing that's out there is a broken down old church, a couple of houses, and as many times as I've been through that place, I've never seen a single soul walking around. In any case, it's a pretty strange place to spend $13.5 million of our money. And what was it that Carly Provenza said? Some money just has to be spent. So that got me thinking, did the legislature spend a similar amount of money in the supplemental budget? So going back, there were so many budget amendments, and all of them, the ending vote was 36-26, so you kind of lose track after a while. But I did find one obscure appropriation for statewide broadband in the amount of $27,467,221.14. The only note attached to it said, Otto, Wyoming. So I went back and looked at the YouTube video around where that amendment would have come up, and I found the strangest debate I have ever heard. I don't know how I missed it while I was sitting there in the gallery, but evidently I did. Here's John Conrad trying to say something about spending money on this dumb project.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would like to address a few items specifically based on facts, as I pointed out earlier when we talked about this. Specifically, as we look at the results, to give you some perspective, but it's not voodoo as it relates to this technology specifically. It's critically important that we do everything in our power, possibly, as we look at this emerging science and technology. It's all around us. Additionally, and to conclude, if we don't take advantage of this, we'll all be at a loss. We believe in it. If we're gaining anything, we're gaining something. But to do nothing is to, more importantly, seal our fate.
Yeah. That was all from the same speech. It's almost like a whole bunch of data got all jumbled up when it was transmitted to his vocal cords. A trip to the site and following those coordinates from the original typewritten memo led to exactly what I see every time I drive through Otto on my way to Cody. Nothing. Not a single thing. And so, either this $40 million appropriation for Otto, Wyoming is a giant slush fund, or it's something else that I'm missing. So in an effort to salvage my trip to the middle of nowhere, I got out one of my subsonic microphones and turned it up. Take a listen to what it recorded. I was just as shocked as you are. It was at this point that I noticed a green Suburban traversing the 2-track that I had taken to get to the exact coordinates listed on the original typewritten memo, and it pulled up right beside me, and wouldn't you know, out of the Suburban stepped Jackson Democrat Mike Yin. Now, it's not unusual for Mike Yin to show up in places where I just so happen to be. For example, the last time I was getting out of my car on Main Street at the base of the Bighorns, and out of a car stepped Mike Yin. Coincidence? I think not. Now, Representative Yin would not go on the record about the sound that I had just recorded at that obscure site in the middle of Otto, Wyoming, but he did say that in 1990, the Democrats realized that they were losing to the Republicans, and in the 1990 legislature, they were able to get a $13.5 million appropriation passed for communications, which they euphemistically called broadband. As it turns out, the Democrats knew that they were going to be in the extreme minority in the coming years, and so they hatched a plan thereby they could control the conversation with more liberal Republicans. who bought into this whole broadband nonsense, even though the rest of the country doesn't have any need for it. It still gets funded. Evidently, when you vote for liberal policies that are backed by the Democrats, and specifically Mike Yen, it automatically enrolls you in their communications network. After a while of voting with the Democrats and listening to the inane rubbish that comes out of the Wyoming media, that sound that I recorded earlier begins to sound a lot like this.
We are the Borgs. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
And so, Democrats don't really need to get elected in force, simply because they can control the liberal Republicans that already do. And they do it through this massive communications hub that you have been paying for. If you'd like to know why ridiculously bad local newspapers are still able to operate, it's through funding of this communications hub, whereby they get their information straight from Otto, Wyoming. Now, if you think this whole story is preposterous, just think about the liberal Republicans forming their own caucus. And finally, if you see Mike Yen anywhere, he's probably up to something. Though probably nothing over 5 feet. He'd need a step stool for that. It's too bad this whole thing isn't true. It would definitely explain why there's 31 Republicans that vote with Mike Yen and the Democrats almost all the time. Come to think of it, maybe it is true. Have a good April Fool's Day, and go tell some not-so-tall tale to some unsuspecting victim. From the base of the Bighorns, in beautiful Buffalo, Wyoming, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.